So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. In this episode of Call Me CEO, I'm joined by Kelly Sayre. She is the women's personal safety expert and founder of the Diamond Arrow Group and best-selling author of Sharp Women. Her journey is all about something that many moms can relate to. She realized that she was responsible for keeping her children safe and having no idea what that actually meant. We can relate with this. We have mama bear instincts drilled into us without even knowing when it's happening. That moment sparked a business, a mission, and ultimately a movement. And today, Kelly works with law enforcement, Fortune 50 companies like Disney and Coca-Cola, and women all over the world, teaching radically different approaches to safety rooted in situational awareness, intuition, and confidence, not fear. And I love that so much because we all are born with intuition that is given to us for a reason. So, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. This conversation is so powerful, so needed, and I'm really excited to get this conversation going with you. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So tell us a little bit more about the mental load of motherhood, how this journey was sparked for you. It's such a big topic that I would love to just get a little more foundation of how this began for you.
Sure. As you mentioned, it really came from a place of now I have young to protect,
Mm-hmm.
which I see over and over in my work as I've continued on this journey is that a lot of times mothers, their first concern is for their child.
Yeah.
And they forget that they're part of that equation. Their child needs them home and safe and sound as well. But I do not have a law enforcement background. I don't have a military background. I never took martial arts in my life. I had been athletic in high school and active afterwards, but I was like, if other than, sparring with my brother growing up, I've never been in a fight. I don't know if I would know how to protect myself and my kids. And when you talk about kids, they were 3 and 4 at the time. Okay, well, they have little legs. And if something's going on and they're scared, they can't necessarily be quiet. They're going to react in a way that's natural for kids. So I want to avoid getting into a situation, or I need to know what I need to do. And it was after taking my first quote unquote women's self-defense class. We had spent the entire 4 hours doing the physical skills, which is great, which you do need to have. But at the very end of class, the instructor said, but ladies, predators don't pick prey they think is going to overpower them. They try and search for someone who they perceive as weaker. So the last thing you want to do is get into a physical fight. You need to be more situationally aware. And then he sent us on our way. And my brain did the full stop. Like, wait a minute. We just spent the entire time focused on the skills that I'm supposed to avoid using, but the thing I'm supposed to use 99.9% of the time, we didn't talk about at all. What do you mean, situational awareness? What am I looking for? How do I know I'm looking for the right things? And if I see something, then what do I do? And the more I asked those questions and reached out to people who, were situational awareness experts or violence prevention experts, predominantly men in different areas of executive protection or law enforcement or military training, so on and so forth, they all have wives or moms or daughters or sisters, women in their life they cared about. So they knew what I was asking for. And so I said, great, where can I go and get training? Where can I go and learn how to do this? And they're like, well, there is none. And I was, well, that seems silly. And, maybe some other words that I used,
Yeah.
but it was, we're the ones getting attacked. Domestic violence is a real issue. The stats on stalking, on sexual assaults, on, simple attacks, just physical, that's primarily happening to women, but we're not giving them the information of how to try and prevent it or to be aware. And so that really started my journey because there was a need. I had friends who, when I was like, I don't know if this is a thing, I don't know if I could do this as a business. And in my book, I mentioned in the acknowledgments, I had one friend who quite bluntly said, but aren't you worried if you don't do this, women are going to die? I was like, well, now that you put it this way, I guess I don't really have, a
Yeah.
reason to not do it. Um, and while we can laugh about that, it is very true. And the more I went on this journey, the more I discovered that psychological aspect that women deal with, that more of our mental and emotional boundaries get tested before it even gets to a physical aspect of abuse. And because 75 to 85% of attacks on women come from someone we know, that those early warning signs look different than a stranger attack. And you had mentioned something, earlier in a conversation there. It's not the stranger danger, it's the tricky behaviors. And I like to say the strange behaviors, because sometimes it's not necessarily tricky, but it's just off. And
Mhm.
a lot of what I teach is going to, especially women, but I also do co-ed because really this is information that every human should have. And I want to help men understand the behaviors that they don't think are that big of a deal, why it's a big deal to women, why that's something that may seem threatening to one person, but not threatening to another. And really,
Mhm.
it's about that knowledge piece. And it's about helping people build confidence that they have their autonomy and that they can use their voice and they can speak up for themselves and they can protect what's important and they don't need to apologize because that tends to be a more female trait is we'll apologize about taking up space. And it's funny how now I catch myself doing some of those things. It's like, somebody bumps into you by accident in the store and you apologize to them, right? We
Yeah.
just do it. Oops, excuse me. Like we're not have the same reason, ability to take up space or whatever. It's not about being rude. It's about being direct. It's not about you can't be a kind person, but you can have boundaries and you can speak up for yourself and things that make you uncomfortable and not have to apologize for it.
Mhm.
And so much of the journey and things that I've learned as I've gone along this way for almost 10 years has come from my motherhood and things that I've learned even from my own kids. I have two boys. So this work is also really interesting because I'm thinking about how do I want to raise that a young man, a
Yeah.
gentleman. And so modeling those behaviors and calling out any misogyny that I see and say, well, actually that's not okay. And making it a conversation of education versus don't, bad. Because I do think a lot of it is a lack of education or a lack of understanding. And if we come at it from that is trying to help educate people and build their awareness of how their behaviors might be impacting others, then it gives them an opportunity to make a change because we know we can't change other people by force. So sometimes it's simply just letting them know is, hey, this is why that might make someone uncomfortable. And here's a different way to look at it. Here's a
Yeah.
different way to think about it.
It's interesting that you bring up the apology piece of bumping into someone and saying sorry, because I mentioned before we started this recording that a friend of mine was sexually assaulted, and when she fought back, she said sorry to her attacker. And she's like, looking back, I'm like, why did I say sorry to this guy? He was literally, I mean, I need to put like a warning in this episode, but she was getting assaulted and potentially losing her life. And she hit him back and said sorry. And she was like, why am I apologizing? And I think there is conditioning within us, whether we realize
Mhm.
it or not, that kindness and those things that we value so much about respecting others and things like that can be put to the side when your own safety is at risk. And I think that unless we put ourselves in the what if and then conversations in our own mind or education piece, we don't necessarily think about that until you're in that moment. And like her, she was saying, oh my gosh, why did I apologize in this moment? So I would love to know, what do you believe about safety that most people would disagree with, or maybe some different ways of thinking about it so that we can create space for us to stand in our own space and own our own safety?
A lot of times I say the important first step is curiosity. And it's not necessarily curiosity about the world around us. Yes, being aware is being curious about our surroundings, the sights, the smells, the sounds, all of those things. but also curious about ourselves. Because, and ironically, I just did a training on perspective, is all of us are born, to your point, with intuition, right? It's intuition. It has two key factors. It's always in response to something, and it has our best interest in mind. It's not a prankster, is what I like to say. It's not trying to test your reaction
Mm,
speeds. It literally is a life-saving foundational skill that helps us recognize when something's off in our environment and needs our attention, is what I like to say, because the paranoia thing can make us really, if you think about like fear based, and can really make us scared of everything around us versus a curiosity, which is kind of like an easier way to think about it,
mm,
is to say, well, the curiosity, why am I having this reaction? What about that caused my like adrenaline to spike a little bit? And an example I've used before is sound. We sometimes think of awareness as using our eyes. Yes, eyes are very important. Our sight is very important. But I had a terrible boss experience, and he had a certain accent from a different country, and didn't really think anything of it because it's not like I was around this accent all the time. And I was going to speak at an event. And so I was coming in at lunch, I was speaking after lunch. And so I hadn't heard the announcer, the MC. So I'm sitting eating lunch, and all of a sudden the MC got on stage to kind of get everybody back to their seats to get ready. And he had the same accent. And literally, I had a little spike of, oh my gosh, because it brought me back to and it related to that horrible boss. And so that curiosity of like, interesting. It's not that the MC had ever met me before, had never done anything to me, but the accent reminded me of a
mhm,
bad experience in my life. And so getting curious about what things make you uncomfortable. Why do they make you uncomfortable? Where does that come from? Because A, it's a survival instinct, but also, can we overcome it? Can we move past it? Can that be part of our healing? Is recognizing, okay, that was an individual. It doesn't mean that everyone with this foreign accent is going to behave the same way. And so that to me is part of that healing journey, is recognizing a trigger and then being able to calm yourself down so that your adrenaline doesn't spike or that you don't start elevating. Because when we get into situations, and if we're adrenalizing, we can get tunnel vision. Our hearing change abilities change. And so again, it's about that staying calm and staying curious about things. You're going to pick up little things before they escalate, and then you can handle them while you're in a calm state. Because that's another interesting thing about biology between men and women, is that men adrenalize differently than women. So men tend to spike really quickly and then de-escalate really quickly. And I use the joke, it's just how, guys can be arguing at work, and then at the end of the day be like, want to go grab a beer? And they're fine. Whereas women, we might stay calmer longer, which helps us when we think about our caretaking and our nurturing traits, but we tend to stay adrenalized longer, which then impacts our ability in a moment to make rational decisions, especially if we don't have a mental plan in our head already of how we might react. We're just going to do whatever that natural response is. Your friend's response was a fawning response. I'm just trying to appease my
mhm,
attacker so that hopefully it will stop, that hopefully it will end. And so there's a lot of times too with women coming from a trauma-informed perspective of, don't be upset at yourself for how you handled a situation that you couldn't have predicted how you were going to react until you were in it. Like, you did the best you could with what your social programming was available to you at that time. And it's moving forward going, wow, what a learning experience, in the sense of, I don't have to apologize for someone in my space. And that is something that, coming from that psychological aspect, we probably know our attacker. Might be a coworker, might be an extended family member, might be a friend of the friend group. And suddenly there's this whole psychological pause of, wait, I don't want to hurt someone that I thought cared about me. Wait, they must not care about me if they're doing this. And that's something that doesn't get talked about in your typical self-defense class. Because they're
Mm-hmm.
typically men who are teaching the class. There's more and more women getting out there, which I love, and I love supporting them. And it's that recognition of, but guys, you're not going to experience the same threats that we experience. They don't look the same.
No.
And so therefore, when, that answer might be, you just need to, cause them physical pain, knee them or, grab their throats or hurt their eyeballs or whatever it may be. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe I could do that to a stranger, but this might be somebody I know. This might be somebody I had a relationship with. And so for me to go to that level of physical attack, that might take me longer. And we need to talk about that because I don't even want to get and be in a relationship where that's a situation. And if it does happen, it usually is a slow boil they talk about, so you don't necessarily connect all the dots until later in their
Mm-hmm.
hindsight. And so it's like, how do we recognize some of those early controlling behaviors and be like, no, actually, that's not normal. That's not okay with me. And again, you and I could have different tolerance levels, different ideas of what a controlling behavior looks like. And so a lot of what I teach is the foundational skills. I always say you can't teach calculus to a kindergartner. You have to teach math, basic math. It's not that they're dumb, it's that they need those foundational skills. And then they can learn at their own pace. And that's a lot of times too, I remind people why I call my book Sharp Women, is because to your point, we're all born with intuition. I think all women are born sharp. I mean, there's jokes about that sassy young girl, right? She's going to take over the world. I hope she doesn't lose her spunk, right? We're born that way, but societal pressures and cultural norms to be or act a certain way because it makes other people comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
like dulls our edge. We're not broken. We just need sharpening. And so that's how I approach every woman I work with is you have all of these skills inside of you, but maybe no one's talked to you in a way that you could relate to that made you feel empowered to say, oh, wait, yeah. Oh, yeah, I got this. I love talking to women because a lot of times, if there's mothers in the room or they don't have their own biological children, maybe they babysat, maybe they have nieces and nephews, they've been around kids. And I'm like, I know when my kids are sneaking a snack out of the cupboard. And it's not because I see them, it's because I can hear the cupboard door hinges. Moms typically are better at noticing when their 2 year old's about to throw a tantrum and de escalating it fast because they recognize the signs earlier. Women are excellent at de escalation, but because it's typically in a parenting role, we don't think about it from a personal safety role,
Mm.
right? I think women are excellent at calming a situation. I have a friend who's has a retail store, and she was closing up her shop. It was just her. And she had an individual come in, and at first it wasn't a big deal. It was a male and just making small talk. But then he started making comments that were making her uncomfortable. And she's like, "Ah, I don't know about this." And so she did her best to kind of talk to him and guide him to the door and get him out the door. And then she locked the door. But it really shook her up because she had a teenage daughter. And she's like, what if my daughter had been working? What would have happened to her? And when she reached out and I talked to her, she felt guilty because she's like, he was in the store for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, good on you. There's no time limit on de-escalating a situation. It didn't escalate. Neither of you got hurt, and you got him successfully out the door and locked the door. So, congratulations. And she said, she's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. Because again, women just feel this expectation of, well, we should know what to do all the time. We should know
Mm-hmm.
how to handle it because that's what society tends to tell us. And I'm like, it might take me a long time to talk to one of my kids and get them to calm down, but that's typically what happens is
Yeah.
it's typically my job. And I shouldn't say job in like a negative way, but that's
Yeah.
typically
But we're
where I
teaching.
shine is
Yeah.
like I'm the more empathetic one. That I have some of those natural caretaker nurture abilities, and we can use those in our adult life. It doesn't have to be, and I always say we all communicate different ways. we know this, that you and I might communicate differently. So you telling me, well, Kelly, just do this. If that's not my natural communication style, if I try to use that in a situation where maybe somebody's making me uncomfortable, it's going to sound robotic, or I'm going to trip over my words, or I'm going to say it wrong, or whatever. Whereas if I'm like, A, you don't have to say anything, you can just walk away. I use sarcasm and humor. And if that doesn't work, then I know. But it doesn't, there's no one size fits all when it comes to safety. And so that's really what I talk a lot about to women is, you can have someone who's, I don't like killing spiders. I can't imagine, having to fight an attacker. Okay, well, what are some things that we can do? Let's make sure that you have some really good safety habits in place. So, as soon as you get in your car, you lock your door. Turn the auto unlocks off in your vehicle. So when you put your car in park and turn it off, your doors don't automatically unlock, they stay locked. Right there, those two things are going to help you stay a little bit safer because someone's not going to be able to get into any of your other car doors, whether you have your kids with you or not, simply because your door is locked.
Mhm.
So it's giving them that like, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, that's something I could do. And then they build their confidence. And then like, oh yeah, it's kind of like reminding them. I'm not giving them power. I'm not giving them confidence. I'm reminding them that they're already pretty awesome. And it's just simply some sharpening. And, common sense isn't common sense to everyone. And it's not in a bad way. It's life hacks. Like I was today years old when I learned this.
Yeah.
It's just because nobody talked to me like this. It was simply just be aware of your surroundings, gouge eyeballs and kick them if you feel attacked. Okay, well, that's not a one size fits all. If
Yeah.
my coworker is driving me nuts, I'm not going to gouge his eyeballs. Like I'm going to go to HR then and get in trouble. So there has to be a deeper conversation,
Yeah. Other
a
ways.
bigger conversation, because otherwise it doesn't fit. And then women go, well, what's the point?
Yeah. And you say that confidence, not fear, is what keeps women safe. So if you were to break that down, because there are a lot of different scenarios, different personalities, as you say, what would be some first, like one, two, three things to start with in building the confidence in speaking up for themselves?
Um, this is something that I ask women is if you get the wrong order at a restaurant, do you feel able or willing to speak up and say, oh, that's not what I ordered? Right there, people go, what? And I'm like, literally, that's speaking up for yourself.
Hmm.
Start there. And with my kids from early age, we said, okay, you order what you want. And it wasn't so much about, we didn't want to order for them. It was about teaching them how to communicate with a stranger. And if the stranger, the server who they don't know, repeats back their order and it's wrong, do they feel comfortable challenging that and saying, actually, that's not what I said. I don't want cheese on my burger. Oh, okay. That ability to speak up for themselves and what they want. And that's a simple thing that's pretty low, low threat,
Hmm.
a way to start speaking up for yourself. If you go through the register line, or anytime somebody says, would you like to donate to charity? That was the biggest thing to me because they'd be like, would you like to, round up to the nearest dollar to save kids dying of cancer? And to say no felt awful.
Yeah,
So I
totally.
really, that to me was a big psychological thing of it
Hmm.
doesn't mean I'm a bad person. I know I make charitable contributions
Other
throughout the
ways.
year
Yeah.
in other ways. So me saying no isn't saying no to wanting to help somebody who might be in need. It's this is my priority, and I know that I do it in other ways.
Yeah.
And so those are some small things, or even simply with your kids. There's times where my kids are like, we really want to do this, mom, or can you do this with me? And there's that mom guilt of like, well, of course I want to do this with you. I want to hang out with you. And then afterwards, whether it's I didn't get the work project done or I'm really tired, I didn't get a chance to relax, then suddenly I'm resenting my kids for wanting to hang out with me versus saying, you know what? I would love to, but right now I need to do XYZ for the next 30 minutes. Can we do this afterwards? Or whatever the case may be. So and then that's the modeling the behavior for your own kids too.
I love that. And I love that as you built this and realized it needed to be something that was shared everywhere. At what point did you realize that this was bigger than you, and how did you build it into a business?
That's a great question because I knew it needed to get out there, but I didn't know how. And as with a lot of entrepreneurial journeys, what your business model you start with doesn't end up being the business model that you end with. And one of an important trait, I think, in successful entrepreneurs is the ability to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
I burned the ships, quote unquote, mid 2019 and was going to go all in on speaking and doing public classes. And then COVID hit. And
Ah.
suddenly I found myself, nobody wants more Zoom trainings. Nobody wants to be on Zoom any longer. I'm now homeschooling my children. My husband at the time had a job that he had to still keep going to work. So a lot of that fell on me, and my business had to take a back seat for a bit. The silver lining, which is also important about being an entrepreneur, because especially as a mom, you can't control when your kids get sick, when they've got a band concert, when they've got a sporting event. So being able to be flexible, but I recognized, you know what? I could write a book. And so that really was the silver lining of COVID for me, is I was able to write a book and get it out there, because then anybody anywhere could get the information at a pretty low price point
Mm-hmm.
and make it really accessible to anyone. And then when things started to open back up and we started doing in-person meetings, I had joined this association right as I launched the book published, which ended up being good timing. And it was an association that tries to prevent active threats and, the workplace violence, so on and so forth. And the thing about it is they were finding from COVID and a lot of women being stuck at home with, the threat and not having a place to go. We couldn't go and congregate and be places. Everything was shut down. So what do you do? And now all of a sudden there was the conversation of, well, now is this OSHA? Because there's that duty to provide a safe work environment. But if the work environment's at home, then what's the business's job? So suddenly that personal professional situation of, well, what happens in the home, it doesn't come to work. Suddenly there was a blurring of that line. And a lot of companies recognize that, yes, active threat training is important, but how do we even not get to the point where the threat's at the door? How do we stop it earlier? And that really opened the conversation to say, we need to give this information to the individuals who are more likely to recognize those signs earlier, which tends to be women. Science has proven that we're better at reading tiny micro facial expressions and accurately understanding the emotions tied to it. And I giggle and I laugh when I share this too in my trainings. I'm like, ladies, how quickly do you recognize your friend is having an off day the minute they walk in the room? Women
Mm-hmm.
are really good at that. And again, not to knock on the male side of the world, but I joke and say, how long does it take your male partner to recognize you got your hair changed? You went and
Yeah.
got a haircut or a hair color. And again, we joke about it. And that's how I like to teach, is like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we joke about this so you can relate to it, because it's, tends to be something society, cultural norms. But women, we notice these things. So we're going to notice when someone's behavior changes. We're going to tend to notice that something's off. And even if we can't quite put our finger on it and articulate it, we can sense it. And the ability to be able to sense it, to not dismiss it, to not discount it, and to be able to articulate it is what makes all the difference when it comes to preventing violence in general. Um, a lot of times women are in those roles where they're closer to people who might be having a mental health crisis, whether that's teachers or nurses or moms, whatever it may be. So in my mind, again, why are we not talking to
The
women
ones
about their
teaching.
superpower?
Yeah,
Why are we not
absolutely.
giving them the knowledge and tools in a way they can relate to? I
Yes.
always crack up when it's like women's personal safety class hosted by, some guy who looks retired FBI or military or law
Yes.
enforcement. I'm like, I get it. You have safety skills. But if, it's kind of like,
There's a
Like,
lot more
never been a
that's
woman.
nuanced. Yeah. Yes. Oh, absolutely. So you're building this business. How did it come from, I have this idea, I want to share these ideas, to then working with companies like Disney and Coca-Cola? How did this happen? Like, I'm just dying to hear.
Excuse me. Well, it was part of belonging to that association is that there's
Mm,
really smart individuals that are out there like wanting, they want to help keep communities safer. And it's kind of one of those paradigms, like insanity, doing the same things over and over
hmm
again, expecting a different result. And so here I came. I like to joke that if you remember Legally Blonde, Elle Woods, well, I was always called, are you law enforcement? Like, where's this background coming from? I'm like, no, I'm hospitality and tourism. Actually, I worked in restaurants and hotels. But I was like, I'm not LE, I'm L, like L Woods.
Yeah.
You just don't expect to see me. And I'm, like to wear high heels and I like to dress up and I like to wear colorful and bright clothes, which stands out sometimes in those suits. And there's more and more women getting into this, which I'd love to see, but it was that opportunity to say, well, who do we know that does this? And I'd be like, wait,
Mm,
right here. And so it's taken a while because it's hard to say, well, this is what I teach. And they're like, well, we teach situational awareness. I'm like, guaranteed it's not the same way I do, but you kind of have to trust me and build a relationship of trust and respect to hire me. And so really it was getting up on stage. It was sharing what I was doing over and over and over again. And it almost like the squeaky wheel gets the oil and just
yeah.
saying, no, I believe in this because I get the messages from women who maybe have shame, maybe are embarrassed. I know so many women who are perceived as these confident, outgoing, successful businesswomen, and they've had stuff happen to them and they're ashamed of it because they're like, how could I, what will people think if they find out this happened to me? And it's taking kind of like your friend apologized, it's
hmm
taking what that person's actions did to you as somehow your responsibility. And so it's those messages keep me going when I'm doubted, when it's discounted, and I'm like, oh, okay. And really, the adage of, don't wait for someone to give you that opportunity. Don't wait for someone to give you a stage, build your own stage. And that keeps me going is, well, you've got this business. And I always say no one can get ahead of you if you don't quit. And how many other women, to all of the adages and the mantras and do people really do this? It's like, no, really. If you've made this progress and you've made these steps forward, then turn around and help the next woman come up. Turn around and help her. Best practices. Hey, this is where I found success. Because to me it's again, women tend to be more collaborative. Okay, well, there's lots of women, and there's unfortunately lots of situations and events that happen where women lose their life, or their children lose their life, or bad things happen to them. So there's plenty of work to go around, and the more voices we can elevate, and the more people that we can help support each other, the harder it is to ignore us.
Yeah. Now, with getting on stages, I know that that's something that I've talked to quite a few women about that have wanted to get on stages, and it can be hard. I know, especially where men are typically paid a lot more. And I've even had a friend who, she said that she pretended to be her own agent, but the agent was a man, and she was able to book like 5 times the price of what she was getting as a woman. What has your experience been with that?
Unfortunately, very similar. There was a specific speaking engagement that I got asked to speak at. And one of the other speakers was a colleague of mine from that association who I knew. And weather related, I was not going to be able to get there. So I called my colleague and said, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it due to weather. Before I call them, I'd love to be able to say, but hey, I've already filled my spot, so you don't need to worry about it. And so in that conversation, it's like, yeah, no problem. I can do this. I have plenty of things that I can do to kind of fill that spot for them. And somehow it came up that he was getting paid. And I was like, wait, what? Like somehow it was like, well, I won't even charge him more. And I was like, wait, what? What was that? Because they weren't paying me anything. They weren't even going to reimburse my travel expenses. And I was like, And so I confronted the planner about it. I go, hey, I just want some clarity on something because I'm not going to be able to make it. And in talking to my male colleague who is offered to fill my spot so that you guys aren't left, a couple days before the conference without a speaker, and he mentioned he was getting paid. And this was via email. And so inflection, whatever is lost. But I tried to keep it as like, I'm going to get curious about this
Mm,
before I make
yeah.
assumptions.
Yeah.
And the response back was, well, yeah, we had part of a grant to bring him in. And I was like, but you didn't have a grant to bring speakers in general in, just certain speakers? And I never really got a response, but it was one of those where I've seen that. And I've seen it from a planner's perspective too. A friend of mine was booking a keynote, and it was a male speaker and a female speaker. And both of them were talking about, safety and awareness kind of, but they had, very similar backgrounds. She had been Secret Service, he had been FBI, they'd both written these excellent books, all of these things. And what was so fascinating is they asked for proposals from both of them. And the females was $5,000 less. And my friend wanted to go with the female because she's like, it's new, it's different, she's spunky, and I want to give her that opportunity. And before she even had a chance to get back to this person, because of course there's a committee and we've got to get approval from the committee, they had already reached back out and said, hey, we'll give you a discount and we'll lower the price. And she was like, I wanted to tell them, don't, you were already lower priced. But she goes, it was too late. Like they had already sent the committee. So the committee's not going to be like, no, 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 we'll pay you more. They're like, sweet deal. And so, too, that's another thing about the collaboration is reaching out to women and being like, no, like this is what I charge. This is what you charge. Or did you do this? Because there is a trade-off. There's events, and this drives me nuts sometimes, is we're a women's empowerment event, but will you speak for free?
Mm,
No, this is my business. And, there are times where, hey, you can have a vendor booth and sell your book or sell product, and then it might balance out. But most of the time, it's no, I know it's going to get 30,000 impressions from your email list or, all these people, but I've just not seen that come to fruition. And that's where I have to value my time and set those boundaries of kind of like charitable giving. I already made the choice to do these four speaking, maybe you say one charitable speaking event a quarter. And, let me know if you're interested next year, but here's my rate.
yeah.
And I have heard that before where it's like have an assistant or a male assistant do the
Yeah.
follow up. I have heard of that as well too. But for me, with the corporate speaking, is I usually try and ask ahead of time, well, what's your budget for this? What do you typically see? And or because the industry is fairly small, when I see other speakers, I might know them or feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, I just got asked to submit a proposal for this event. Can you help me understand like what helped sell your speaking proposal last year? Like what did you charge or what did you put in there? And so that way it's not that I'm trying to compete. It's that whole is like, let's keep each other and make sure that each of us has those opportunities. And it is funny when you get that and you're like, you charge how much? Oh my gosh, I need to charge more,
Yeah.
because you won't get what you don't ask for.
That's right. And a lot of times we think sometimes when we discount our services that people will want it more, but it's this perceived value that people will
Mhm.
say, oh, well, this person charges this much more. They must be more in demand. Like it's this whole like
Yeah.
mind game that we all have to play with as entrepreneurs, trying to figure out, what is it that we're looking for and how do we put this together? So I appreciate you sharing that perspective because I think as women, again, we can shortchange ourselves in that way. And it's important to stand up for ourselves. So
Yeah.
you're offering now a subscription box called Scaling Without Losing the Heart, where you're launching the Sharp Women subscription box and you want to turn this into a physical, tangible experience. So tell me a little
Mhm.
bit more about that.
Sure. So, where that really came from, I will be quite frank with your listeners, was out of desperation. Another thing about standing up for yourself is sometimes having to terminate a contract or turn off turn away business because it's not an alignment. And I had had a 3-year contract with a local school district, and my point of contact changed. So one gentleman
Mm.
retired, the other gentleman got a promotion to a different district, and so a new individual came in, and you know, long story short, is basically he had different perspectives, and his approach to dealing with me was not respectful. And I felt like this guy is not gonna, like, it doesn't matter what I say, what I do. It's his way or the highway, in the sense of, I don't believe you. I don't believe you've done this work. So now you owe us. And I don't know if we're going to pay you
Mm.
until you make up what I think you owe us. Even though I'd already done the work, he was basically saying, no, I don't believe you. Okay. And tried to have some conversations back and forth. I could see this is, this is the way it's going to go. This is the mindset. And so I said, you know what? I think it's best if we don't continue this conversation. So let's just terminate this now. Well, while that felt good to match my integrity, I am a single mom, divorced mom with 2 boys who is an entrepreneur. And turning down that, or terminating that contract, suddenly was like, okay, I thought I had a year to try and figure out, and because I'd been working so hard on this contract, I hadn't been able to fill my sales pipeline because I needed to be
Mhm.
ready. I needed to be available. And so suddenly the pipeline's dried up and there's no income a big chunk of my income had gone away. And I was like, huh. And in conversations with one of my best friends, and I was like, okay, what if I did this? And, trying to pivot. And what if we do this? And what if I create this? And she is a busy mom herself who has a full-time corporate job. And she's like, Kelly, I don't have time. You have all this information. You have all the research. You've done it. Just put it in one little package for me and hand it to me. And so that's really how it came across. It's like, okay, I know women want this information, but when I'm putting out one little quick video on Instagram, hey, get this flashlight, it really doesn't explain. It's not enough time to explain why, how to use it, how to think about it, scenarios. And a lot of times women, to your point, what we talked about earlier with the locking the doors, unlocking the doors, is there's little tiny habits, daily
Mhm.
habits that you can start implementing that are going to impact you in the long run. A lot of people have read Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's not about a big change. It's about tiny, consistent habit changes. And so that sparked the idea of a subscription box service. And we did the market research. There wasn't anything out there when it came to women's safety that was a subscription box model. Yeah, we can get, the candles and the clothes and the cool
Jewelry.
thing,
Yeah.
which is great, which I love, I've used them too. But what if we had something where that wasn't scary, And so much of, like, when you Google men's safety equipment, it comes up like on the job stuff, and women's safety equipment is all these different tools. But most of the time, what I hear over and over again from vendors is it's men buying the tools for the females that they care about in their life. So they're not explaining the psychological aspects of it. They're not explaining the scenarios of when to use it or why this is a good tool. Or they're just saying, this is what you need to use, without seeing, do you even feel comfortable with mace? What about a personal alarm? Okay, well, depending on the scenario, a personal alarm, if you're out walking a trail by yourself, isn't going to do you a lot of good. But at the same time, if you're someone who takes lunches and walks the Skyway, or walks internal, like, you might not want to have mace, because you might mace the entire building because it'll get sucked into the air vents. And that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's those type of things where do women go with these questions? Where do they have that? And so the subscription box came from that. Can you just put it all together so that it makes sense to me from a female perspective? That's not, I don't want it pinkified. I don't want it necessarily blinged out, but I also don't want to try and be G.I. Jane. Where is that happy medium? I'm a
Mhm.
mom, right? I, women's clothing typically isn't conducive. We don't even have pockets in our pants most of the time, right? Like,
Sadly true.
right? How can we, like, I have a blazer on right now. It's got fake pockets, but it doesn't have an inside pocket like a men's jacket does.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think about all those things. I remember one time too, talking with a pepper spray company. And I'm like, do you realize all of your female products that you're advertising on your website, it's a man's hand holding it? Like your products, depending on what my fingernails look like, I may or may not be able to use it. Because if I've got the almond-shaped fingernails, it's not going to work. And it's one of those things where they were like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. Well, no, you probably don't, you don't go get your nails done, right?
Right.
And so it's those little nuances that often get overlooked, not because they're not trying, it's because they think they're not us.
Yep.
They don't have the same, they don't live the same experiences we live. And so how can I get this information in the hands of women and or themed, and maybe like we're going to do a college safety box. Okay, well, maybe you're not going to college, but I bet you're of the age group that your daughter is, or maybe some of her friends, or you've got relatives or friend of friends. There you go, built-in gift. One thing off your list. We're trying
Right.
to make it easier for women. We're going to do a home safety box. You know, how many, myself, divorced, living on my own. It's very different when my kids are here and when they're not. There's safety concerns. I am now the protector. What do I need to help keep my kids safe? Widows, right? College girls going out, living in shared spaces or getting their first apartment on their own. What things would be good for them to have that isn't, we don't have to make our houses Fort Knox.
Yeah.
We don't have to make them look
But
scary.
literally having tools that we feel comfortable using. Yeah,
Right.
that's brilliant.
Travel safety. Travel safety. Okay, as women, I mean, there's the stories, unfortunately, where a male would walk up to a front desk and say, "Oh, my wife, my girlfriend, my coworker, is in this room and I left my key. Can I get a key for Kelly's room?" And they're given it, even if the name's not on the room. And so it's not that they're even breaking in, they have a key. So what things can we put in place to protect us? That's not because, okay, let's be honest. Women, it's really hard to travel because we have toiletries, right? And they all have to be under 3 ounces or whatever the case, if we're trying to not have a check bag. So what tools can we carry that aren't going to take up a lot of extra
Mm,
suitcase space?
yeah.
What things are easy to use that are pretty inexpensive? And again, somebody shows us and talks about it and makes us feel like, oh yeah, I could use that.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy enough, and gets it from our perspective. Like, hey, think about this. And maybe when you're checking in, tell them no one else is staying in my room, period. Right? What other things can you do? What other conversations as you're traveling? There's stories of a young woman who simply was going to a huge security conference. Airline lost her suitcase. She just made a comment out loud to her boss who was sitting next to her. Airline lost my suitcase. So we got to run to Target, right? I need toothpaste and deodorant and makeup. And somebody sitting close enough to her on the plane overheard that, found her throughout the week in her booth, kept showing up at the networking events she was at. And even to the point where he got her hotel room number or room, her name enough to know that he called her room. And he kept calling her by her seat number. And she was so freaked out about that. But he was like, "Oh, did you, get your suitcase? Did the airline find your suitcase?" She's like, "That's just weird. He keeps showing up. Like there's 30,000 people at this conference. I'm feeling really unsafe and uncomfortable." And the fact that then he called her room made her super uncomfortable to the point where her male coworkers made sure that she was never alone. Even when she went to the bathroom, they'd just walk and hang outside the bathroom. And it's stuff like that that people are like, "Oh my gosh, how can we help women who travel for work? This is part of their job, feel safe and not be made fun of for, well, you don't want to fly, you don't want to land after dark, you don't want to take an Uber after dark in a strange city, or you don't, whatever the case may be." It's like, these aren't women being difficult. These are women who are trying to stay safe and do their job.
Yeah.
So what can I do to help those women have the tools and resources so that they can keep living life on their terms? And so that's why with the subscription box, we've created the Sharp Women Collective because, again, collaboration. I'm one person. I don't know everything, but I guarantee there's someone in the group who has experienced something or has some life hack that they've found works for them. And so if we can have a community where there's no judgment, there's no shame, you share what you want, or you just take it all in and read it and we talk about it. Hey, this is the latest situation. This just happened in the world. Okay, how would you deal with this? Let's talk through some scenarios because
Yeah.
the last thing I want any woman, but especially those who are maybe starting their careers or maybe they've hit the time where they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go travel now. I've worked my butt off. My kids are graduate, whatever. I'm going to travel. I want you to live out those dreams. I want you to go to those cool places. I don't want you to say no because you have fear and you don't know how to build confidence in yourself
Yeah.
from that personal safety perspective. Because
If,
as I said, like I have gone so many cool places and met so many cool people that were complete strangers.
yeah.
But I felt confident saying, I know what I'll have to do. Like that mindset. You brought up Mama Bear. It's one thing I like to remind people is even society is more comfortable with Mama Bear and thinking about a mom doing whatever it takes to protect her young. But they're not so comfortable when women fight back, when women are violent. That makes people uncomfortable because that's not quite what a lady is supposed to do. But I'm always like, but I need you to get back to your kids. So the mama bear should apply to you as well because you want to get home to your kids, and that's okay. And so if there's things I can do that might seem silly to someone else, did you get home safe? Are you okay? Then awesome. That's the win. Nothing happening is the win.
Yeah, that is the goal. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. Tell our audience where they can learn more about you, your book, and this new subscription box.
The best way is to follow the Diamond Arrow group on any of those social channels, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Our website is thediamondarrowgroup.com. That's where you can get on the notification list because we are going to start showcasing and featuring and talking about the subscription boxes. And we're going to do a founders box as an initial launch. And it's going to have special things and cool events and one-time only opportunities added at a discounted rate, so to speak, just to say, hey, thank you for believing in us and helping us reach more women.
Yeah.
And they can get all of that information by getting on the email list on our website. And I always say too, feel free to follow me personally on LinkedIn. That is another way to reach out because the more that we can connect and get to know one another and help spread the word, the better. Because guaranteed there's a woman out there who has some questions and doesn't know where to go to get the answers in a way that is empowering and builds her confidence and doesn't make her feel embarrassed or ashamed.
Yeah. We definitely need each other when it comes to finding confidence and encouraging each other to have safety in our own space, as well as our children and other women that we know. So if you found this episode inspirational, helpful, please rate, comment, like, follow, share anything that you can do to help spread Kelly's message. We want more women to show up and be the mother bears in their homes and back at home at night. So thank you
And
so
building their
much.
businesses because
And
that's the
building
thing
their
too.
businesses.
Because
That's right.
as a founder and a business owner is having confidence and being able to walk into a room full of people that don't know you and have confidence to speak up. That's that's so important.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.